She survived a rough river crossing. A passing cowboy gave her shelter and won her devotion. She had not planned to cross the river that day. In truth, she had been avoiding it since morning, standing at a distance and watching the water rush past as if it were alive. The river was wide, loud, and swollen from days of heavy rain upstream. The current moved fast, carrying broken branches, leaves, and mud. Anyone with sense would have waited for the water to calm down or looked for a safer crossing far away. But she did not have the luxury of waiting. Her name did not matter in that moment. What mattered was that she was tired, hungry, and running out of options. Everything she owned was packed into a small, worn bag slung over her shoulder. Her shoes were already soaked from walking through wet fields, and her legs ached from days of travel. Behind her was a past she could not return to, one filled with loss, fear, and choices that had left her with no home to claim. Ahead of her was uncertainty, but also the smallest chance of a new beginning. She walked closer to the riverbank, her heart beating faster with every step. The wind brushed against her damp clothes, sending a chill through her body. She knelt down and dipped her fingers into the water. It was icy cold, stealing warmth instantly. She pulled her hand back and swallowed hard. Crossing this river would not be easy. She knew that, but turning back felt impossible. For a long moment, she stood there, arguing with herself. She thought about resting and trying again the next day, but night would come soon, and this land was unfamiliar. She had heard stories about what happened to people who were caught alone after dark in places like this. Fear pressed against her chest, but so did determination. She had come too far to stop now. She tied her bag tighter, adjusted her coat, and took a deep breath. Then she stepped into the river. At first, the water only reached her ankles, then her calves. The stones beneath her feet were slippery, moving when she put weight on them. She moved slowly, testing each step before trusting it. The sound of the river filled her ears, drowning out everything else. Cold crept up her legs, numbing her skin and making her muscles stiff. By the time the water reached her knees, the current began to push against her with force. She leaned forward, using her body weight to stay balanced. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her jaw was tight. Every step felt like a battle between her will and the river's strength. Halfway across, the water rose suddenly to her thighs. The current pulled harder, tugging at her clothes and threatening to knock her off balance. Her breathing grew shallow. Panic tried to rise, but she forced it down. She focused on one thing at a time: step, balance, breathe. Then her foot slipped. It happened so fast that she barely had time to react. The stone beneath her shifted and her body tilted sideways. The river grabbed her instantly. She cried out as the water surged up to her waist, then higher. Her bag pulled at her shoulder, throwing her further off balance. She fell. Cold water rushed over her chest and face, stealing her breath. For a terrifying second, she was underwater, her ears filled with roaring noise, her eyes stinging. The current dragged her along, spinning her body. She tried to stand, but her feet could not find the ground. Fear exploded inside her. She kicked wildly, fighting the pull of the river. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and she let it go without thinking. Survival mattered more than possessions. Her hands reached out, grasping at nothing but water. Her lungs burned as she struggled to breathe. Just when her strength began to fade, her foot struck something solid. She pushed against it, using everything she had left. Her head broke the surface and she gasped for air, coughing and choking. The water was still strong, but now she could feel the ground beneath her. She stumbled forward, half crawling, half walking, until suddenly the water began to lower. With one final push, she reached the far bank and collapsed onto the wet ground. For a long time, she did not move. She lay there on her side, shaking, her clothes heavy with water. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she struggled to catch her breath. Her hands trembled and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Every part of her body hurt, but she was alive. That single thought echoed in her mind again and again. Alive. Rain began to fall lightly, mixing with the river water on her skin. She rolled onto her back and stared up at the gray sky. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, not from sadness alone, but from the release of fear she had been holding inside for too long. After some time, she forced herself to sit up. Her legs felt weak, barely able to support her weight. She looked back at the river, watching it rush past as if nothing had happened. It had nearly taken her life, and yet it moved on without care. The sight made her shiver. She tried to stand, but dizziness washed over her. She sank back down, realizing she needed rest. The cold was becoming dangerous now. Her soaked clothes clung to her skin, and the wind was growing stronger. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to keep what little warmth she had left. The land around her was quiet and empty. Tall grass swayed gently, and a few scattered trees stood in the distance. There was no sign of a road, no smoke from a fire, no sound of people. The isolation pressed down on her, heavier than the cold. She thought about calling out, but her voice felt weak and she doubted anyone would hear. Instead, she focused on staying awake. She knew that closing her eyes now could be dangerous, so she kept moving her fingers, rubbing her arms, forcing her mind to stay alert. Her thoughts drifted to how she had ended up here, the long journey. The mistakes, the moments where she had nearly given up. Each memory felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Right now, all that mattered was surviving the next hour. As the light began to fade, shadows stretched across the ground. Her fear returned, sharper this time. She was exposed, cold, and alone. She did not know how much longer she could stay conscious. Then faintly she heard a sound. At first she thought it was her imagination, a dull rhythm mixed with the wind. But it came again, clearer now. A steady beat, hooves, her heart jumped. She pushed herself upright and strained to listen. Yes, there it was, someone or something was approaching. She tried to stand, hoping to make herself visible, but her legs gave way. She fell back to her knees, frustration and fear rising together. She raised one hand weakly, unsure if anyone could see her. The sound grew closer. Hope flickered inside her, fragile but bright. Whoever was coming, she prayed they would notice her before it was too late. She stayed where she was, shivering, watching the distant shape begin to form through the mist and fading light. She did not know then that this moment, this river, this struggle, this near end, would change the direction of her life. All she knew was that she had crossed something far greater than water, and somehow, against all odds, she was still here. The sound came closer, steady and calm, cutting through the rush of the river and the whisper of the wind. She lifted her head with effort, her vision blurred from cold and exhaustion. Through the fading light, she saw the shape of a horse moving slowly across the grass. A rider sat tall in the saddle, his outline dark against the pale sky. She tried to speak, but her voice would not come out. Her throat felt tight and her lips were stiff from the cold. She raised her arm again, this time higher, hoping the movement would be enough. The horse stopped. For a moment everything was still. Then the rider leaned forward slightly, as if trying to understand what he was seeing. He guided the horse closer, careful and alert. As he approached, he noticed her soaked clothes, her shaking body, and the way she struggled to remain upright. He dismounted quickly but calmly. His boots touched the wet ground and he stepped toward her without sudden movements. His face showed concern, not fear. "Easy," he said gently, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now." The cowboy knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance. He could see how cold she was, how close she was to losing strength. Without asking questions, he took off his heavy coat and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders. "Don't try to talk," he said. "Just breathe." She clutched it with shaking hands, nodding slightly to show she understood. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but from relief. He stood and led the horse closer, then returned with a canteen. He held it near her mouth, letting her sip slowly. "That's it," he said softly. "Small drinks." She swallowed carefully, focusing on staying awake. Once he was sure she could sit on her own, he looked around the area. The sky was growing darker and the temperature was dropping. Leaving her here was not an option. "There's a shelter not far from here," he said. "It's nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm enough." Trust did not come easily to her anymore. but her body had no strength left to argue, and his presence felt steady, not threatening. He seemed to sense her hesitation. "I won't leave you," he said simply. "You have my word." He adjusted his stance to support her without making her uncomfortable. Step by step, they moved toward the horse. "I'll help you up," he said. "Just let me know if it's too much." As they rode, she focused on the rhythmic movement of the horse and the warmth of the coat around her. Her thoughts drifted in and out, but she stayed conscious, listening to the sound of his breathing and the soft steps beneath them. They reached the shelter just as night fully settled in. It was a small wooden structure tucked between a group of trees. It looked old but sturdy, with a simple door and a stone fire pit inside. The cowboy dismounted and helped her down, guiding her carefully into the shelter. Inside, it was dry and protected from the wind. He wasted no time. He gathered firewood, struck a match, and soon a small fire flickered to life, casting warm light across the walls. The heat made her shiver even more at first, but slowly, feeling returned to her fingers and toes. He placed a blanket near the fire and helped her sit. "You're doing good," he said. "Just stay here. When you're ready, change into these," he said, turning his back to give her privacy. She stared at the clothes, overwhelmed by the simple kindness. Her hands moved slowly as she changed, each motion taking effort. When she finished, she wrapped herself in the blanket, feeling warmth spread through her body at last. When she looked up, he was sitting a short distance away, tending the fire. He did not stare or ask questions, he simply kept watch. Minutes passed in silence. Eventually, she found her voice. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "You don't owe me anything." "I thought I was going to die," she admitted. He poked the fire gently. "Rivers don't care how strong you are," he said. "They demand respect." "I don't really know," she said honestly. He nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. "Sometimes that's how journeys start." He noticed immediately and stood, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "I'll keep the fire going." Inside the shelter, a stranger kept watch, and a woman who had nearly lost everything slept safely by the fire, unaware that this meeting, born from danger and kindness, was only the beginning of something far greater. She woke slowly, not knowing at first where she was. Warmth wrapped around her, gentle and steady. The sharp cold from the river was gone. Instead, she felt the soft crackle of fire and the solid ground beneath her. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the orange glow of flames dancing against the wooden walls of the shelter. For a moment, fear tried to return. Then she remembered the river, the horse, the man who had helped her. Her breathing slowed as she took in her surroundings. The shelter was small but clean. The fire was still burning, carefully kept. A blanket covered her shoulders and her wet clothes were folded neatly nearby, already beginning to dry. She sat up slowly, testing her strength. Her body still ached, but the shaking had stopped. That alone felt like a miracle. Across the shelter, the cowboy sat quietly, sharpening a small tool by the firelight. He looked up when he heard her move. "You're awake," he said. "How do you feel?" It made her feel exposed somehow, like her strength had been taken from her. But she reminded herself that surviving was not weakness. The silence between them was calm, not uncomfortable. The fire filled the space with sound and warmth. Outside, morning light filtered through the trees. "Thank you," she said again, more firmly this time, "for staying. Didn't seem right to leave. Happens fast out there. But there's some food, enough to get you through today." As her body recovered, her mind began to wander again, back to questions she had been avoiding. "What made you stop?" she asked after a while. He thought before answering. "I've passed people before," he said. "People who looked fine but weren't. I learned the hard way that if something feels wrong, it probably is. But I didn't." Sunlight reflected off the river in the distance, calmer now, as if nothing had happened. Seeing it made her chest tighten. "I don't think I can cross another river anytime soon," she said. He followed her gaze. "No need to rush," he replied. "The land will wait." Later, she sat on a log near the shelter, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. Her strength was returning slowly, but her thoughts felt heavier now. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said, as if sensing her thoughts. "But if you want to talk, I'll listen." He nodded once, from something, even when it doesn't feel like it. The fear that had driven her across the river had softened. It wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled her every thought. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked toward the horizon. "I was heading north," he said. "There's work up there, ranches that need hands, towns that are fair enough if you mind your business. I can take you to the next town, or you can travel with me a while, or you can stay here until you're ready to move on." She felt something unfamiliar growing inside her, not fear, not desperation, but trust. It surprised her how easily it came. That night they shared another meal by the fire. The air cooled again, but she did not shiver the way she had before. When she lay down to sleep, she felt grounded, not lost. As her eyes closed, she realized that this shelter was more than just wood and fire. It was a pause in her life, a quiet place where she could breathe, heal, and choose her next step. Outside, the river flowed on, no longer an enemy but a reminder. She had faced it and survived. And now, with the help of a stranger who asked for nothing, she was beginning to believe that survival was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. Morning came quietly. Pale light slipped through the gaps in the wooden shelter, touching the walls and the floor in soft lines. She woke before the fire fully faded, feeling rested in a way she had not felt for a long time. Her body was still sore, but the pain no longer scared her. It was the kind that reminded her she was healing. She sat up slowly and listened. Outside, birds called to one another and the wind moved gently through the trees. The world felt calm, almost unreal after everything she had been through. The cowboy was already awake. He was outside, tending to the horse and checking supplies. When he noticed her standing in the doorway, he gave a small nod. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. Her voice sounded stronger than it had the day before. That alone filled her with quiet pride. He handed her a cup with warm liquid inside. "It's not fancy," he said, "but it'll help." The silence felt shared, not empty. "I've been thinking," she said at last. "That can be dangerous," he replied lightly. She smiled. "About what you said, about choices. If I go with you, it has to be because I choose to." They prepared to leave the shelter that afternoon. She moved carefully but with purpose, packing the few things she had been given. The shelter had been a safe pause, but she knew she could not stay there forever. Life was meant to move, even when movement was slow. Before they left, she stood at the edge of the clearing and looked back one last time. The shelter looked small now, almost hidden by trees, but she would never forget what it had given her. They traveled at a gentle pace. He did not rush her and she did not ask him to. The road ahead was uneven, but the land felt less threatening now. With every step, her confidence grew. As they walked, he pointed out landmarks, places to rest, signs of weather changes. He spoke simply, without acting like a teacher. She listened carefully, learning more than just directions. She was learning how to read the land, how to trust it without underestimating it. That evening, they stopped near a low hill and made camp. She helped gather wood, her movement steadier now. When the fire was lit, she sat close, feeling the warmth against her skin. "I should tell you something," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Only if you want to." She nodded. "I don't want to just survive anymore." He taught her how to start a fire properly, how to judge distance by the sun, how to listen to the wind. She learned quickly, asking questions, trying again when she failed. In return, she brought something he hadn't realized he was missing: conversation, laughter, presence. She reminded him that life was more than roads and jobs. Sometimes he caught himself watching her as she walked ahead, steady and focused. He respected the way she carried herself now, not as someone running, but as someone choosing. One evening, as they rested near a small stream, she spoke again. "You could still leave," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "I know." A shared understanding settled in. They did not speak of devotion. They did not promise anything, but actions spoke louder than words. He waited for her when she grew tired. She reminded him to rest when he pushed himself too hard. One afternoon, they reached a small town on the edge of open land. He slowed as they approached. "This is where I was going to leave you," he said. She stopped walking. "Is it where you still plan to?" "Neither do I." It had grown from respect, from trust built slowly, from kindness given without demand. The river had tested her body. The journey tested her heart. And somewhere between survival and choice, she had found something rare. Not safety alone, but belonging. The town was small, but it felt busy compared to the quiet roads they had traveled. Wooden buildings lined the main path, and people moved about their day with purpose. Some carried supplies, others spoke in low voices near doorways. Life here had its own rhythm, steady and grounded. She felt nervous at first. Being around people again reminded her of the life she had left behind. But this time, fear did not control her steps. She walked beside him, not behind, not ahead. Just beside. They found a simple place to stay for the night. It was nothing special, just clean and warm. As she sat on the edge of the bed, she realized how far she had come, not just in distance, but inside herself. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this calm again," she said quietly. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. "Calm comes when you stop running from yourself." She offered help where she could, cleaning, carrying water, learning tasks she had never done before. No one asked too many questions. That suited her just fine. At night, they talked more. She spoke about the life she had escaped from, not in detail, but enough for him to understand the weight she had carried. He listened without judgment, never interrupting, never offering quick answers. "I thought leaving meant failing," she admitted one evening, "but staying would have broken me." When he grew quiet, she knew to give him space. One morning, as the sun rose over the open land, she joined him outside. He was saddling the horse, moving slower than usual. "Are we leaving?" she asked. "Not today," he said, "but soon. There's more land beyond this place." "That's why I'm asking myself." Quiet mornings, nothing grand but real. One afternoon they stopped near a familiar sound, the river. She froze for a moment, her body remembering before her mind could. The water moved calmly now, sunlight dancing on its surface. He noticed her tension. "We don't have to go near it," he said. She shook her head slowly. "No, I want to." The river looked different now, not as an enemy but as a memory. "I thought it took everything from me," she said, "but it gave me something too." As they moved on, she realized her devotion had grown quietly, without force. It was not blind or desperate. It was built on shared days, shared effort, shared respect. Weeks turned into months. They found a place where the land opened wide and the work was steady. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Together, they repaired a small cabin. She learned to cook with what they had. He learned to slow down. Sometimes they sat outside at night watching the stars. "Do you ever regret stopping that day?" she asked once. He shook his head. "No, that river gave me something too." The river crossing had nearly ended her story. Instead, it became the place where it truly began. And she knew, without doubt, that devotion earned through kindness and choice was the strongest kind of all.